Hello everybody, my name is Armand Smith, also known as Raptura, and this is yet another post-mortem game jam video, this time for Slime Drop, which was part of the GMTK 2017 game jam, hosted by Mark Brown. I did this game with my good friend Brian Mata, who did all of the sprite work, and helped me with choosing what we would be actually doing for our game jam. This game jam actually had a theme. It was based on some of Mark Brown's videos, which he has on his YouTube channel, which I'll link in the description. In this case, the theme was based around his video on Downwell's dual-purpose design, where a mechanic had two different purposes, not just something for the sake of in our case it was jumping. So jumping also changed the platforms for our game. In Downwell's case, the rocket boots not only slowed down your descent, but also defeated enemies and did a lot of other things. So it changed platforming. It did a multitude of things. So yeah, our game is really simple. Just as one single button spacebar every time you jump. You actually change which platform you'll be landing on. So as you can see, I'll jump now, and instead of landing on the green, I'll land on the pink. I'll jump again, I'll land on the green here, and then that's essentially how our game progresses. And it progresses until you hit the goalpost at the end, which I'll try to hit right now. And I didn't make it. Yeah. So yeah, let's get right into the post-mortem part about this. There actually isn't a lot of scripting that we did. There's only the coin, the death zone, the camera itself, which is essentially copy-pasted from a bunch of other games that I've made earlier. There's not too much in there. The actual game control, the game controller, the goal itself, which is essentially just a collision, the platforms, which has no script, and then the player motion, which is I believe the majority of the script. It's not too much here. So with the player motion, we have just two states. You're either falling or jumping, and you're always constantly moving to the right at a constant speed. So whenever you press a spacebar, you invoke a jump. When you do jump, you need to ensure that the physics is correct. So we're just using a typical rigid body 2D for this, using a jump height as our jump height variable for our anti-gravity variable, and then we're moving down the same speed as gravity. So using 2D physics, this is act as an impulse, and then we just invoke that. We just add that force onto our player, change our animations as we need to, say that we are jumping, and we're good. In order to check that we're falling, we want to see if we're actually moving downward. So we check our velocity going downward to see if it's negative. If it's below a certain threshold, then we say that we are falling and we are no longer jumping. And then we also, when we're falling, we also make sure if we are jumping that we check this as well. This one is just for the animation, and this one is for the actual the variable changes. Yeah. And then here's our auto move function, which just says, move right at a certain speed with respect to our time. Not too much there. Our game controller simply has our update for the score text, has a reset for whenever we die and we hit the death zone, which is a certain part of our game. And then it has a swap layer function, which changes all of the collisions for either the pink or the green platforms. So originally what we wanted to do was we wanted it so that every time we jump, we actually switch layers. So this would be more of a 2.5 dimension game instead of a 2D game. We decided because of time and since the fact that neither of us are actually artists, both Brian are actually programmers, but we had Brian do a lot of the sprite work. I did like a little bit, not too much, just like test stuff. That we would just have it be 2D and that we would manually change the collision layers instead. I felt like that was a lot better, especially for our time constraint. But in the future, if we ever want to make a 2.5D game, if we had like some sort of animation that would move us in between two different layers of the tiles, then we would definitely do that. It definitely would be a lot smoother and honestly a lot easier to code, in my opinion. Like we wouldn't have to change all of these colliders here, and then make sure that they're all correct. Make sure that the color is correct. Since we actually change the transparency as we change the what is the active collision, just so that the player has some sort of feel as to which tile that they're going to be landing on. Coins are just coins. One cool thing that we did add was we made it so that whenever you gather coins, you actually speed up, which was a very interesting last-minute design choice that we made. It definitely makes it so that if you want to go for a higher score, you definitely have to take more of a risk, since now, since you're faster, your jumping is going to be a lot different as opposed to when you originally start the game and everything is really slow. It sort of eases you into playing the game. So yeah, that's just like one thing. The last thing that we did was we actually used this tool called Tiled to Unity. So what Tiled is, it's actually a tile editor that I've been using for a very long time. I can actually bring it up right now. It allows you to rapidly get maps or two-dimensional levels out there. So this is like what it would look like when we made it tiled. We would essentially just switch between the green and the pink layer, and we also had a coin layer, which was how our objects would be spawned into our Unity project. And this is essentially how the collisions would be set out, how the level would be designed, so that we wouldn't have to manually do it in Unity, because that actually takes a long time. So you can see the entire level here. The flag was actually made here, but we made the flag in Unity itself, so it's not actually present in Tiled. Then after that, we would use Tiled to Unity, which was a Unity asset that here's a license, and it's just a free tool that you can download, which you bring up in Unity, and you just say, okay, I want to use Tiled to Unity. So I go into Unity. It comes up in the bar here, Tiled to Unity, export Tiled to Unity library, and that's how you get the Unity package. And then after that, I actually haven't looked at this project in a while, so it's probably going to take me a second to get it. But you can see the test map here comes up. It has its own script. It comes up as a tiled map. You can see background color and a lot of other things you can mess around with here. And it all comes up in this one clean Unity object. And you can see the coins we had. It says jump. And you have all the green layer, the collisions for all of that. And the collision comes up as a mesh render, which I've never actually worked with before working on this project. But I thought it was very interesting because normally whenever you would make a collision like this, or you would have like some sort of multi-tile tool, each tile would have its own collision, and it would be typically a box collider, which would span the length of the tile. So I thought this was a very interesting approach. It's actually more optimized this way, so since now you don't have so many Unity objects on the screen at once, and your game will run a lot smoother. So for the future, I'll probably work on using this tool instead of my homebrew tiler. The only difference is, so the hex tiler I made before works with hexagonal tiles. Tile to Unity, I would have to use a lot. I'd have to do a lot more in order to get hexagonal tiles in. However, I feel like using a mesh renderer for my own hexagonal tile editor would be better, as well as consolidating a lot of these tiles into one Unity object instead of what I have, which is a whole mess of Unity objects, which can slow down the game. That's probably why Snowdown sometimes has those like not so much glitches, but it can be slow at times. So I can definitely see the pros and cons of this. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with my own editor after seeing this tool, but it's definitely something to think about. But overall, I think that the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam, we went pretty well. We had a lot of different judging categories that we went through. Sadly, our game didn't actually get judged, but innovation, I'd say that our game wasn't too innovative. We sort of just did this just to explore different tools, as well as just doing something during the summer, since this would be our first game jam together. And Brian, I don't think Brian has ever done a game jam before. This would be my second game jam I've ever done. The first one being Well. So I feel like for a 48-hour game jam that we did pretty well. Theme, I think our theme fit, or I think our game fit the theme pretty well. Just being able to jump and switch platforms. I know that's not too big of a stretch into the theme, but I feel like that's definitely something to note. The aesthetics for two guys who have no art experience at all, I feel like this is pretty acceptable for aesthetics. It's really tight control. I feel like every time you die, you feel like it's more your fault than the game's fault. Other than that, if the game was like a lot longer and we had like a bunch of levels, I feel like the game would be something that you can have like on the App Store, just like as a tap game or something. Overall, I feel like this was a really good experience. Again, for a 48-hour game jam, this was definitely something that I would want to continue working on and exploring the concepts that we had. We don't have any music or things of that nature, but if we did, I feel like it would be a lot more like sort of floaty, like typical, not Mario sounds, but something that you would hear in like older games like that. That being said, thanks for watching my post-mortem game day video. This has been Armand Smith, also known as Rapture.